This is a very brief introduction to adding and subtracting decimals. So let's look at what we've got here on the board. First of all is addition. And I have here the same numbers or same digits used in every single one, except I've changed the decimal place so that I can show you different examples of how this works. In this case, I've added some zeros for place value as well, so you can see what to do. I'm just going to go through the basic rules now. First of all, when you're adding two numbers such as this together, you always add the ones values together first, and then the tens, and then the hundreds if there are other hundreds, and then thousands and so on. So another way to show this and illustrate it that a lot of people use is that they will write this so that they are lined up so that the digits, so the ones digits are lined up, the tens digits are lined up, the hundreds, and so on. But notice another way to think about this is that in order to line those up, also the decimal will be lined up. And now we've introduced a decimal. When you add these together, of course, it makes it very easy to then add like that. We don't usually put the decimal in because it's not needed for a question like this. But it is important for you to note that that decimal is lined up, and at the end it would be there if you needed it there. Now let's look at a question where we've got a decimal in it now. Now, the very first one, we lined up the ones digits and we lined up the tens and the hundreds. In this case, you have hundreds, tens, and ones, and all you have is a ones digit, so you line up that 4 underneath the 1, and you have a decimal 7. Okay, so we're adding again. In this case, so you need something to add to that 7. And what you're going to do is put the decimal in for both of them and put a place value 0 in there. And now you can add them up. So what you would get then is 7, and 4 plus 1 is 5, a 3, and a 2. So basically it's the same rules. Here you didn't have the decimal in, and you don't usually show it, but I did so that you realized that you need to line up the decimals, and you put a place value where needed. Okay, so now let's do the next one in the same rules. Line up the place values, and you can think of it too as line up the decimals. So in this case, where would the decimal be for this one? It's right here, but for the 47, it would be right there. So let's line them up. 2.31, and this would be 47 decimal. And now you have to add in the place values, and then you can add, and don't forget to put that decimal place there, and it goes right underneath because you've lined them up. So now when you get to something like this, which looks a little crazier because it just added all those digits 0 into it, so as place values, you still have the same rule, where the decimal for the 47 is after the 7. So you take that 47 decimal, and you've got the next number, you're adding that. And of course, you need to add then those place value zeros, and you add them up, and the decimal goes underneath, and it's nice and it adds up nicely, right? So you don't always have to place one underneath the other. If you can do this in your head, then that's also fine, as long as you remember to keep adding the ones digit with the ones digit, the tens with the tens digit, and the hundredths with the hundredths digit if you have decimals. Now the same rules apply for subtraction. Again, when you subtract two numbers, you always subtract the ones digit from the ones digit, and the tens digit from the tens digit, and the hundreds digit from the hundreds digit. So this is why we line them up, just like that. And again, the decimal would have been there if you needed the decimal. In this case, you don't really need it, and then you just subtract, as you normally would with your algorithm. If you have to carry over, and then you would carry over. In this case, I haven't included carrying because it's not about how do you subtract, it's more of how do you set up a decimal place. So now let's look at the next example. And again, you line up the decimal places, or you line up the digits so that they are properly under each other. So I'm lining them up. It's easy to see the decimal, but it's also, the decimal lines up all the other digits. You're minusing, oh, we need a place value here. So I'm going to put a place value there, and now I can subtract. When I subtract, this is one way to subtract. I know there's different ways. I'm going to use this method. And so I've got 9, 2, a decimal goes underneath, and then a 5 and a 9. And that's it for addition and subtraction with decimals.